So I really have the best job in the world because I get to meet amazing people every day. And when we met, one of the things I said was, "There's no such thing as accidents." That we were, brought together, and because there's no question that we're going to be working together after this moment. And I want to show you something I thought was pretty neat. And this is Larissa Fasthorse post on her Instagram right after her first showing of a Thanksgiving play. And on that post, she said the following: "I said a lot of years ago, I want to be the first known Native American woman playwright on Broadway. I am. Don't be afraid to speak your dreams. Don't be afraid to dream big. It's okay to want big things. It's okay to achieve them. Plenty of folks will try to pull you down as soon as you start to achieve these things. Find folks that want you to fly." And it's incredible. She was the first female Indigenous playwright on Broadway, and that has opened up the doors to inspire other Indigenous people that them too can have their name attached to a Broadway play. And I think it's so fitting to have these two extraordinary individuals on stage with me today. To my immediate left, you have William J. Osceola, who I like to call Popeye, who at a young age is one of the youngest leaders in the Miccosukee tribe as their secretary, and that's a big deal. That's the equivalent of being the Secretary of State, so that comes with a lot of responsibility. And prior to that, Popeye also had a big responsibility as an educator to young Miccosukee youth. Popeye, as I'm sure he'll tell you, wants to retire early, and before he accomplishes that, he wants to make sure that the next generation of leaders are capable of leading and making him comfortable to follow them, and giving them the tools to be proud of their history and their culture. To my far left is Cheyenne Kippenberger. On my shirt, it says, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." And I think that both of them are their ancestors' wildest dreams. And it's so cool to have Cheyenne's father and grandmother here today, so I'm sure you'd agree that she certainly is your wildest dreams. Cheyenne, through the avenue of pageants as Miss Seminole and Miss Indian World, has been an incredible advocate and ambassador globally, in addition to her past role with the Aspen Institute, educating and showing the world the beauty of their culture. So I want to start the beginning of this panel with a couple questions to get you all acquainted with these two amazing people, and then we'll move into unpacking the play a little bit. So Cheyenne and Popeye, although you both have rich family histories, when we last got together and got to know one another, there was a mutual consensus that you were born swimming against the current from the get-go. So what were some of the challenges that you witnessed growing up in your communities and your early influences that led you to embrace your Indigenous identities, educate others, and lead?
I can start us off. Well, on more of a personal note, I think that when I look back to my childhood and I think about the difficulties that I was facing, I think that the obvious barriers are kind of sticking out like a sore thumb at school, going to a predominantly white private school, then going into a public school where I was probably the only Native there, and realizing that there was so much misunderstanding about Natives in general. And then in addition to being Seminole, I'm also Chilena. My mom was born and raised in Chile and moved to America, and so I grew up with a very, very unique cultural background, and both of my parents were very adamant in instilling both sides of that in me growing up and in my siblings as well. And so, you know, being in school and realizing like, wow, they know nothing about Native Americans, let alone Seminoles or Miccosukees, and then also having this uncomfortability with not feeling Latina enough, it created this uncomfortability with my identity at large, and really questioning myself, am I enough, am I whole, and realizing that language and culture and traditions really are these key components to the foundation that make us who we are, and realizing that I don't have all the answers to all these questions, and I may not be fluent, I may not be the most traditional person, I may not have grown up in Chile directly or anything like that, but it got to a point where I realized that there had to be this radical acceptance of myself, because if I allowed everybody else to police my identity, and if I allowed the world to tell me that I wasn't enough and that I didn't belong, I could succumb to that, right? And then just kind of curl up and take it as it was. But honestly, I just woke up one day, and I remember it was significantly during my college education, actually. And I was at a university where I was the only Native student, I was the only Seminole student, and they came to me and they asked if I could ask my tribe to turn this lake on my res blue for like an awareness month. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you know, we want to like honor your people, and we want to like, you know, create bridges and all these things. And I was like, that's not how you do that. And yeah, I remember it made me feel awful about myself, and then it made me continue to think about these other awful experiences I had in school, and especially during Thanksgiving time. And you know, everybody gets to dress as pilgrims, and my teacher allowed my cousin and I to choose to dress as Indians instead. And yeah, I had to wake up and I had to decide, I am just enough, and this was what the world wanted, and if the world wasn't okay with Cheyenne, then it really wasn't my problem to fix for other people. And so my comfortability had to be the foundation that I built for myself. And so yeah, it was a radical acceptance. And then I think about what did little Cheyenne need? What did little girl Cheyenne need? And that was what I decided to become.
So generally the question was like how we're swimming against the current from the get-go and whatnot?
Yes, and then what were some of the challenges that you saw within your community growing up, and then what inspired you to want to educate others and lead?
So challenges, I did spend part of my youth up in New England, in Connecticut, so up there it's very much this mindset of like, look how great we are as a country, look at our roots, look at our proud history. But going to public school up there, I realized, because I had enough background, even at a young age, at 4 or 5 years old, to know kind of what it meant to be Native internally. So you go up there and you just realize, well, this isn't real history that they're teaching mythology, American mythology. And as you start to learn into the actual history, you just realize as indigenous people how much is just set against you from the get-go. Just something as simple as the Declaration of Independence, you know. Right there in that text it says that they want to protect themselves from the savages. Oh, who are the savages? Oh, that's us. Talking about Thanksgiving. And I know internally that just the sense of like we're different is there from the beginning. And it's not necessarily to be like, oh, to make us feel less than, but we just realize, okay, there's a different lifestyle, there's a different philosophy behind how we grow up. I do recall being a little kid at Thanksgiving, like, I don't know, kindergarten or something, and they made us draw a Thanksgiving scene. So I drew a native on one side shooting arrow, and there's a pilgrim on the other side, but I didn't want to get in trouble, so I drew a turkey in between them. But I knew where that arrow was going, even at like kindergarten, first grade age. So yeah, it's just, you just got to learn to adapt. That's something that's always been in our history. So when I first got on the stage, I was adapting to the lights, so I was sweating, but you guys see I'm fine now. So give us time, we adapt.
Awesome. So we touched on Thanksgiving much earlier than I thought. So can we stay there and then go back?
Let's call this.
Okay, cool. So how did the play make you feel? Did it take you back to being in New England as a 5-year-old, or did it make you take you back to being in school and feeling not enough and dressing as a Native while everybody else dressed as pilgrims?
I'm gonna let you go first because this is actually my second time seeing the play.
Oh, sure. No, it was a fun experience seeing the play. It's a lot of familiar beats for those of us, even though You know, even tribes always have different backgrounds, we're all different nations, but we've all been treated the same basically by the larger society around us, so they always fit us into those boxes. Up in Connecticut, obviously, as a native, I was one of the few natives that was actually in the school, the public school, so that was always highlighted. There was me and a Hawaiian kid, so it was always pointed out, even though it's Hawaiian or Heritage or Thanksgiving time, they would always look at us. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things that it sticks out to you so much, and at a certain point you just start getting a little numb to the pain of it, I guess. And that's never a good thing, because if you're hurting somewhere and you can't feel it, that means it's going to be a bigger problem later on. So, but yeah, the play was, reminds me of, it's complicated because, you know, Thanksgiving, it has that original meaning behind it. That's what they're trying to promote, that mythology, but, you know, it's just shifted so much over the years that it's almost more, I don't think secular is the right word, but it's more commercialized, more about capitalism. So it's interesting because I see how that kind of reflects how a lot of things start. These things are promoting this mythology, and then it goes towards the ultimate goal, which is always to try and sell stuff, you know, so I kind of see Thanksgiving in that way. A lot of people just use it as a time to come together, eat, and celebrate, you know, tell each other what they're thankful for. I don't think they talk about pilgrims and Indians as much, generally speaking. But that might be still something that's still more within the school system, so that's obviously still an issue.
You touched on trauma. Yesterday, trauma and kind of being numb to pain. And trauma is something that we talked a lot about. In your community, how have you seen people going about pushing through the numbness and addressing some of that trauma in order to get people to move forward?
Well, I think unfortunately, because of how many things we're dealing with internally, externally, we haven't actually had the time to really process that trauma like you would think. So a lot of the numbing, unfortunately, comes through like self-medication and things like that. Or even just maybe devaluing yourself to kind of make that seem okay. So it's still stuff that a lot of our communities have to work through as a whole.
When I think about the trauma our communities have been experiencing and continue to experience, I think it's really important to understand the context of why, you know, we're in a state of survival still. Our people have a mistrust historically with medicine, with the government, with literally anything, and so when you're in this state of survival and we're now generations upon generations of intergenerational trauma and all these things that are so deeply rooted in our communities, it's really hard to have to sit here and like unpack these things and go to therapy and whatnot. Like, we still have to make a living. We still have to make sure our children are fed and get to school. We have to do our laundry and, you know, drive to Publix like everybody else. And so, you know, also just taking into consideration like the actual capacity to do those things, the resources to do those things. And we have constantly been dehumanized. We're still going under dehumanization, erasure. Everything about our existence is extremely politicized, and you know, it's like we're still just under this thumb of colonization no matter what. And the play, you know, it touches on all these different aspects and whatnot, but the biggest messaging about it is how allyship can, in a way, get summed up to, well, if we don't do anything, you know, we're not exactly part of the problem. But that is a problem in itself, right? Being neutral, in a place of neutrality when we need people to step up, we need people to, you know, put action behind the things that they want to stand for. And so it's difficult. You know, you see your people suffer, you see your family suffer, and you just want to be, you want your people to be okay. You want your culture to be preserved. You want us to be able to live the same lives and have the same opportunities as others. But people don't even understand anything about us. They don't know our histories. They don't understand the battles that we're facing daily, let alone, you know, going through these like much deeper traumas. And so it's angering, it's frustrating, but you know, then you look at, you know, why both of us have taken the path that we've taken, and it comes from a place of love. And it also, I think, touches on this, the beauty of the resiliency of our people too. Your shirt says, you know, my ancestors' wildest dreams, and people always ask, what do you think your people would want for you or for your family? And I'm like, I think that our ancestors just wanted us to live good lives. I think they wanted us to be happy. I think they wanted us to be healthy. I think they wanted us to be able to just exist without all this red tape around us, but that's not the reality. We're constantly just battling to just humanize ourselves in front of people. And so the first step in a lot of these conversations is having to just do the 101 of Native American history, breaking down, that one where just all these different tribal nations, we're not a monolith and whatnot. And then you get to dive into the deeper questions of, what is it that our people, as far as Seminoles and Miccosukes, are actually facing?
I could add something real quick.
Yeah, of course.
Everything she's saying is obviously our experience, but I do want to share with you folks that generally speaking, how we deal with a lot of this is through humor, because it's one of those things where it's like, you gotta laugh or you're gonna cry. I'd rather laugh about it. So we got a lot of gallows humor and stuff like that. I have family up north. My mom got married to a man, Irish man, last name Brady, my stepfather, no longer with us, but really good guy. So I have family connections up north in New England, from his dad's side and the mom's side. So I had Thanksgiving up there with them. And to me, it was always a positive experience, but then I know the history of it, so it's a complicated thing. But, for myself, when I go up there to see them for Thanksgiving, I just joke with them, oh, you guys have an actual native at Thanksgiving, so it's authentic now. But that's for my amusement. It's just, it's a complicated thing. History is complicated, people are complicated. And I think that's something to kind of consider, especially within that play. You kind of saw that hinting, kind of trying to simplify Native Americans to make it easier to grasp. People aren't easy. I mean, people are simple, but we complicate things for ourselves. So Natives tend to do that. We just want people to realize that history is more complicated than you would think.
So ignorance isn't always intentional. And if we're willing to admit that, I know we have to go through kind of a one-on-one process, but how do we go about doing that? And then how do we take that step further to allow ourselves to understand that as it relates to humanity, we need one another, but in order to be allies, we have to be able to understand one another. So how do we get to understand one another and then take it further to tackle issues, and what do you think some of those issues are that we should tackle together?
Well, the reality is, in order to progress as a society, we have to have uncomfortable conversations, and I do think that means having to create spaces where you can have those uncomfortable conversations, spaces like this, asking those uncomfortable questions and having to give uncomfortable answers. And at the very top of that 101 that we keep bringing up is that the United States was founded on the attempted genocide of one people and the enslavement of another. And that challenges American nationalism. That challenges a lot of why Americans are so proud to be who they are and where they come from. And that's complex. People are complex. American history is very complex, but American history is Native American history, and that should be spoken about the same way and honored in the same way. And you can see that lacking specifically within education, of course, but also just this general idea that there aren't natives around. There's so many instances I've had where I get invited into spaces and I speak with people and I'm like, wow, you're the first native I've ever met. And maybe not, but it's having to tackle these misconceptions and stereotypes that we all look the same. We both have long hair and we're brown, so not
both
the greatest.
Have beautiful hair.
Beautiful hair, right? So not the greatest example, but yeah, it's breaking down the complexities and the diversities of our people. And so when we talk about what do we need to tackle, within that 101 is yes, like that's what the USA was incepted on, right? But then you move into, there's 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Every single one of them had a different historical experience, different languages, different regalias, traditions, songs, dances, stories, etc. And then you can move into these more specific things, and we can talk about Seminoles and Miccosukes in that much more specific context. Like our history challenges everything about the picture that America tries to paint about Native Americans, that they won and we were these savage, primitive people that didn't know what they were doing with the land, and we were cannibals and we were at war all the time, and that's just not true. Our people are incredible. We were doctors, we were lawyers, we were leaders, we were botanists, all these different things, educators, and again, that just challenges this entire perception, this narrative that they've been able to lead. And so much of what I believe is if we can shift this narrative, but in doing that, it needs to be led by Native people for Native people.
Yeah, I wanted to add something, kind of what you hinted about natives and people not really realizing we're around like that. I know you and I, I'm sure, have had interactions. I'm sure we actually have a couple of community members, our chairman here. I'm sure they've traveled, they've had interactions where people are like, oh, you're Native? You guys are still alive? Like, it gets down to that level. I don't think our chairman gets this, but then I get asked to, oh, can I touch your hair? So, oh, you're alive? Can I fetishize you? So that's kind of like that interaction you get. So what is the outcome? You know, it's not really humanizing us still. You're kind of still objectifying us in this sense. Oh, now you're here, now you're in museum piece, now I can ogle you. So you really have to take these opportunities when they're presented to you to engage. Everybody is ignorant about something. Ask me about that K-pop band, BTS. I couldn't tell you anything. But that's fine. But if the opportunity is there to learn and it's relevant and it's going to have an impact on people around you, you should take that. Everybody's ignorant about something. As long as you got the opportunity and the chance and you take it, you know, that's okay. You don't always have to be ignorant. But everybody treats that as an attack. It's really more about, use the phrase radical acceptance. Maybe that's something everybody needs to reconcile with themselves. What are you ignorant about? Does it impact those around you? Should you take the opportunity to learn more? That's really the onus that we have, that we owe each other as part of the society, I think. Not even just about being Native or non-Native. You just owe it to learn more about your environment and the people around you.
I know you mentioned allyship initially in your question. And yes, admitting that we are all ignorant about something is extremely important. We don't know everything about everything, and that's okay. Ignorance is bliss, but it can also be a choice. And so I ask you all also to ask yourselves when maybe you do have that opportunity, or even after this, if there's a Q&A, why are you asking these questions? Like, is it coming from an intentional place? Allyship is about creating meaningful relationships and fostering those relationships and thinking about what does that exchange look like between all of us. It can't be exploitive, it can't be one-sided or anything like that. Like, there's something to gain from one another no matter what the space is. And so just recognizing that this shouldn't be something of just, oh, they're gonna be on a panel and that's it. It's like, what are we all taking away from this? Are we planting seeds? Are we watering those seeds? And with everything that we share, continue to pass that on too. I think about the teachings that we've been raised in, and we have an obligation as people. When we acquire knowledge, we're supposed to pass those things on to younger generations. And William's actively doing that as secretary, as he was as an educator as well. Like, what is it to learn a new word in our language, or learn how to basket weave, or whatever that is. Our obligation as people, not just as natives, but anybody, is to pass these things on and create a better world for our future generations.
And Cheyenne, as your role as Miss Indian World, you had a global platform to tell that story. Can you share what that experience was like?
Yeah. Well, funny, we talk about when people say, oh, you're the first Native I met, they used to love when they're like, you're a real Indian princess. And so that was always fun to deal with. But yes,
Can you say that to me again? I've never heard that.
It was very unique. The experience, just getting there in itself, was something really special. It was a communal effort. I had the support of my family, my community, my committee, everything. And so I understood that there was a large responsibility that came with that, not just to represent my own people and my last name, everything and things like that, but I had an obligation to the indigenous community globally. And I understood, again, I don't know the histories of all those 500 plus tribes. I didn't know the intricacies of other indigenous peoples in other places. So I took it as an opportunity that I was going to be doing a lot of homework. With every visit that I went, I made sure to research as much as I could. I would compile questions, and if I had the opportunity to ask their governments, their councils, or whatever it was, or if I was sitting down with elders, sitting down with young people, I just took it as an opportunity to learn. It was never my place as Miss Indian World to necessarily speak on behalf of all Native or Indigenous people. I do not carry the perspectives or the experiences of all those people, but I recognize that when I was in certain places, yes, I did represent them. And so if I had the chance to advocate and speak about environmental injustice, the protections of sacred sites, the importance of funding being allocated for mental health resources for Native people, language initiatives, suicide prevention initiatives, whatever it was, I was going to do that, and I was going to do that very unapologetically. And so Miss Indian World, you know, it was a different ballgame than being, for instance, Miss Florida Seminole. I was amongst my own people the majority of the time. And as Miss Indian World, it was not that at all. I didn't have my family next to me as I did as Miss Seminole, and so it was being uncomfortable sometimes. But it was an opportunity to grow, and that opportunity took me to many different places. I got to go to New Zealand, I traveled to Canada, Mexico, all over the United States. I spoke in front of friggin' Congress one time. And so I just knew that it was gonna be a position that I had to put my all into. And I, you know, the same way I talked about this intentionality, this, you know, fostering relationships, like all of these different things, it's not just preaching that I'm doing, like I had to do that very thing myself as well. And so I was blessed to be able to be in that position. Just to have the opportunity to run was absolutely incredible. And it's odd, but pageantry like saved my life in a way. And so it's literally put me on the trajectory that I am today. It's given me the confidence to realize that like I deserve to be on this stage and speak my truth and talk about my experiences and share my people's perspectives, and as we all do. And so I don't take it lightly. It was beautiful, really. It was a beautiful experience.
Awesome. Papa, you also ran for a really important role as secretary, and as a millennial leader also, I know what it's like to lead a many decade old institution or organization, and you have an opportunity to bring a new perspective to the table. And what's that like, honoring those that came before you and their mentalities, but also bringing new perspective and new ideas and new brain power? What is that like?
It's a burden, but it's a good burden to carry, because you're carrying the burden of other people's hopes and dreams, especially centuries of that, because it's all led up to this for us now. And we're always trying to get things set up for the next decades, the next century, for the people coming after us. So you always have to reach back to the past to see how you can move forward. And I look back, even within our own government, it's only 60 years old, but you know, unfortunately there was kind of a little lost generation where things we were doing didn't get passed on to like my parents' generation. But I look back to like the 80s and 90s, and the tribe was doing really progressive stuff. Even the formation of the tribe itself as a modern government was really progressive and radical. Even this idea that, you know, even though the government says we're not human, we are human, we deserve to be alive, fighting the wars and the Seminole Wars and stuff like that. When you have a whole government against you, it's radical to say, no, we deserve to live. So I always just remember that, we deserve to live, no matter what any outside force says. It's always about sovereignty for us. So that's really what I look back in the past. It's always been about sovereignty for every Native nation at the end of the day. So we've always been fighting for that, so that's the end goal. What do I need to get there? Well, first you need people. You need the people to be healthy. You need the people to be a community so they can stand together. You need land, you need water, so you can grow your food and you got something to survive, right? So those are the things I always keep in my mind, because that's what's always been important, and that's what's going to be important going forward in the future. So even though there's all these new concepts, again, we like to make things more complicated than they are. It's very simple for us what we need to attain, what we need to protect. And we look at things as like, let me simplify it, simple. It's a good word for the play. You protect what protected you. Our environment protected us, we must protect it. Our culture protected us, we must protect it. Our people protected each other, we have to protect each other. It's kind of simple for us in that sense. It's the outside world that kind of complicates it. You start losing that signal and all the noise. I do want to say that working with the kids though, that was probably the second most impactful moment of my life. First impactful moment was when my stepdad bought me a Nintendo, because, oh man. I mean, all the stress. 10:30 at night, I have a choice to make. Am I going to spend the next 4 hours working on some sort of design stuff on a computer, or am I going to play on the computer? So I just want to throw that out there. Art saved us, I think so, in a lot of ways. I mean, you see her dress, my vest, that's art. That's stuff we engage with. I use a lot of art to try to connect with the kids today and use that to connect with the outside world. So I don't know if I really answered the question too much, but I just want to throw that out there. I was working with the kids today. Our community decided that they wanted to try something new. We're working on a TV show with Jeff Corwin, Wild Nation, and we're like the first tribe to really take part in a major production like this. And to me, we really want to spotlight the next generation, show that we're passing on this knowledge and that we value them because they're the ones who have to step up. And it's really about trying to fill these gaps that my generation before me maybe were lacking in, Getting that chance to step up and show you're capable. So we're actually filming with them today. At our school, Miccosukee Indian School, we have culture days. Even though this culture is always imbued every day, I actually used to teach our language and culture class for about a decade. We always had one specific day where there's no social studies, no math, none of that. It's all, you're just gonna do cultural stuff. You're gonna go outside, you're gonna work with your hands, you're gonna work with your people, you're gonna be in the environment. So we were doing that today. We had some of the students were building a gig. Some of them were cooking around the fire, some were sewing, some were beading. So stuff like that we have to do to make sure that we show no matter how much we change, there's certain things we have to carry with us. It's not baggage, it's privilege. And I don't mean that we're privileged in the sense that we're better than you, just that it's a privilege to have these ties and to still be able to reach back to your roots and see where you're from. So all that kind of goes into how we move forward.
Thank you. Barry, I think him saying art saved us warrants an amen. I think that's a validation to what we're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking in my pre-show outside speech that we chose to put it in this environment, in this cafetorium, in a school that clearly didn't have resources for art or didn't value drama enough to, give the drama teacher her own office, and instead she has to share with the janitorial supplies. Anytime we can tell the story of the importance of valuing art, the better.
Unfortunately during the war times we had to kind of master the art of war, but now we can master art like this, so it's a lot better now. Because this is something that's always been a part of us, and I think it's a good sign when you see more of this, because we're not just focused on surviving, we're trying to get to that point where we're thriving.
Exactly.
So I think we should open up for some Q&A. This is a really amazing opportunity to hear from two brilliant people. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I just kind of have a comment. I feel pretty ashamed that I'm sitting here and realizing how ignorant I am. I'm a very liberal person and I care about everybody, but yet here you are presenting something to me that I feel very ignorant about. And how can we learn to embrace Native Americans and learn more about you and be more a part of your lives? How? I feel very ashamed that I'm just hearing this.
Well, I think the fact that you can recognize that means you should carry a little less shame with you, You just have to take the opportunities presented when there's outreach initiatives. I know the tribe, we're trying to work more on that ourselves. We haven't always been the best stewards of presenting our history that we are willing to share and things like that. A lot of environmental stuff, we're trying to get more out there so that way you folks can see the work we're doing. And honestly, some of the best ways to show support for tribes are reaching out to your local, state, federal politicians that represent you folks, because our interests are vastly underrepresented throughout the history of this country. And a lot of our goals are, we're not so focused on trying to make a buck. We're just focused on making sure we have the ground set for survival for the next few centuries. If you look at my tribe, I know we're really stringent about water quality, and I know through Wild Landscapes we're trying to attain mineral rights at Big Cypress to prevent extraction. So when you look at those type of initiatives, there's ways you can help, whether it's donating, advocating, calling offices to let them know this is an issue and where you stand on that. That is honestly the biggest thing you guys can do to help us, is reach out to the politicians and engage with them. And Unfortunately, what's that phrase? The moral arc of this country bends towards that long arm of capitalism. So money talks, and that's how you gotta talk to the politicians. We have been trying to work better together as a true tribe, Seminole Miccosukee. Divide and conquer, unfortunately, has always been a viable strategy. So we're a few decades away from when that strategy kind of drove a little wedge between us, but as you can see, we're here together on stage. So new generations don't have to carry the scars necessarily.
So I have to partially answer that kind of comment. When I saw the play, I thought to myself, when I grew up, I didn't ever associate together Thanksgiving and Native Americans. Thanksgiving to me and my family was the history of people coming from other countries and learning how to do agriculture, and it was the bounty of the food that we were learning how to grow and be distributed, and we were being thankful for what we had. And it was never an association that I had in my mind. I've always had the history of Native Americans, which is something that I have to share with you. I have the same background. I'm Jewish, and we have a history of trauma. God knows we have a history of trauma. Black people have a history of trauma. So I want to say, it's not that you're so different. There's lots of us that are so different, and lots of us that say what we wear, when some extreme Jewish people wear the hats they wear or the yarmulkes they wear, that's very strange to other people. So I want you to know it's not just Native Americans. There's lots of segments of our population that feel the same things that you feel, and we all together is why Matt's organization exists. Together we have to explain to those others that are not experiencing these kinds of feelings what we go through. So we're more alike. I mean, I feel, listen to you talk, I feel very close to you. I don't feel ashamed. I feel I'm happy to meet you and know you, and that I somehow share lots of feelings with you.
So you are engaging with something that a lot of people I find in this country have a hard time with, and that's empathy. And that's one of the most important things that we need to acknowledge and provide for each other. So no, we do have a lot of shared roots in that sense. I've actually, past interviews and things like that, I have used the Jewish people as an example for kind of the shared trauma. The details are different, obviously, but the impact is the same in the end, which is dehumanization. So unfortunately, we all have to realize that we are all just people in the end, basically what you're saying. Yeah, we find all these, again, we complicate things that are simple thing, we're all people, and then we all make these differences between us to try to build walls, but I think that's it, just empathizing with your fellow humans, right? That's the key to everything.
Any other questions?
I'd like to suggest that Barry invite the current governor of the state of Florida to come down and listen to these three fine people.
He's not invited.
Unfortunately, I'm on a self-imposed gag order when it comes to that stuff, because no matter how I feel politically, I have to carry the needs of my people in front of my needs. And I always tell even our own community, because they're not always the biggest fans of politicians, regardless of what side of the aisle, because at the end of the day, they represent the American government. But I always tell them, you have to dance with the partner available, not the one in your head, or else you're just gonna be standing alone all night. So, yeah, there's a lot of issues going on right now, and erasure of actual history is a big concern of mine, especially as somebody who knows the history. And it's not to glorify natives in any way, you know, just wanting to put the truth out there, so we can all just move forward together on the same page. That would be nice.
Would be nice.
I think, I mean, to your point, I want to tell stories that are local stories, indigenous local stories. So let's figure out how to commission some of
You have a card?
the local stories. Yeah, of course.
Barry's got a card.
You know what I mean? Like, those are the stories that we should be having on our stage, and that's the way to educate lots and lots and lots of people, right? And it's, you know, a shame that Larissa's play, which, by the way, features all white people, right? And that's the one that was on Broadway, and that's the one that's opened, this play has opened doors for her. So it's shameful, right, that not only in Gable Stage is 25 years, but I don't know, like, have you encountered an Indigenous story on a stage locally
No,
ever?
that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah,
what
so-
I'd like to have more of. I'd like to know more.
Right, so let's do more.
Actually, I mentioned Chairman earlier, his brother is actually a playwright.
Great.
He's up in Minnesota right now with his play, A Christmas in Ochopee. So I think that's maybe somebody we can connect you to if you would like to maybe have something like that.
Sure. I'd like to tell stories that are here.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell your story.
No, he's,
Our story.
Ochopee's right down the road, so that's where we're from. So it's
Christmas in
actually
Ochopee.
set in the Everglades.
With this young lady starring in it.
You
No,
asked.
I'm good. I'll stick to pageants.
Cool, yes, let's do it.
Earlier you asked, I guess, just how to immerse yourself more. I'm going to shamelessly plug all of our tribal events for both tribes that are coming up. You guys have an arts and crafts festival at the end of December over at the Miccosukee Casino and Resort, and we or village, excuse me, Miccosukee Village.
But you can still go to a casino and resort, please, by all means.
Or you can come to the Seminole Hollywood Hard Rock, and we have our annual powwow taking place in February as well.
In February. I think I was at that, but I'd love to go.
I did want to add a little piece because I know when you think about our tribes, unfortunately, the first thing that comes to mind is usually gambling, the facilities. And people have a misconception about that with us because they think, oh, they're just getting all that money. And it's just, you know, again, money talks in this country and it causes a lot of bitterness between people. They don't realize that by allowing us to do gaming, that's kind of the government admitting that they're never going to get back what they've taken from us. So we need to provide them with some way for self-sustainability. That's why we have that ability to do that within the state, but there's a lot of tribes out there that don't have.
When I saw the play, I thought to myself, when I grew up, I didn't ever associate together Thanksgiving and Native Americans. Thanksgiving to me and my family was the history of people coming from other countries and learning how to do agriculture, and it was the bounty of the food that we were learning how to grow and be distributed, and we were being thankful for what we had. And it was never an association that I had in my mind. I've always had the...
Half Chilean doesn't mean you're not half Seminole. And I think that, you know, being an advocate for something that, you know, others might deem you as being half something versus you just having both and just proudly displaying both, I think is important because different perspectives give you different views. I guess my question is, you know, I was born here and I grew up here, but I think that unless you're French, you don't truly understand the beauty of eating French. That's what I'll say. And I think unless you're, no matter how much you explain it, no matter how much you talk to someone French, I think like you have to be French to understand eating French. And you have to be Cuban to understand being resourceful in the Cuban way or being humorous in the Cuban way. What are some of the things without maybe, I guess I wonder, like, what are some of the things that you can't truly understand unless you're Seminole? Like, is it the groundedness that they talked about in the play? Like, what are some of the things about Seminole culture that it's like, you feel like no matter how much you explain it and how much you see it, until you're Seminole, do you realize, like, you know, you have a mindset on life, or you have a connection to something, or you have a relationship to grief, or like, what is it about being Seminole, do you think, that you have to be Seminole to understand?
The songs. We have our ceremonies and the songs that are sung to us and that we sing. You don't feel that connection and that power unless you are from that, because the power is carried through that history. And you know you're singing the songs your ancestors sung 100, 200, 300 years ago. And even some of the songs, you don't even really remember what the words mean at this point because of how much things have changed, but you know that when you sing that song, you're reaching back into the past and they're grabbing you. That's something that I don't think unless you're from our people, you really can understand that impact and that feeling. I mentioned Chairman, his father. I'm not always the most spiritual guy in that sense. I'm open to it all the time. I have to be in the right mindset. But when I've heard him sing songs, I can think of 2 instances specifically in my mind where it's like, oh wow, yeah, this is why it's great to be a part of these people, to be a part of this moment, to be connected with everybody here. All the guys singing, dancing, women stomping with their shakers and stuff like that. That's one of those things, that cultural ceremony, that's really hard to understand what that's like unless you're a part of it.
Exactly.
But everybody has that within their roots. If you look back, everybody was indigenous at some point. Even Europeans, you go back to their history, they're dancing around fires, they had medicine men, shaman, all that stuff. So it's all there if you look for it, but you really have to find that connection within yourself. And that's something special with everybody. That's what makes you unique, right? So you have that uniqueness, but it's that commonality. Everybody has this, but it's all different.
I think for myself, I recognize that I didn't come from like the most traditional family, and so what he's referring to, I feel that when I sit with the women in my family. And I think about when I was a little girl, and I think about my great-grandma Mary Tiger, and how she was teaching my oldest sister to sew, who then years later was teaching me the same things. And so I think about exactly what you said, that connection, and what comes to mind is community. I think that our entire perspective and experience of community is very different than other people's. Like for instance, when you're Cuban American, you still get othered. Because I get othered as a Chilean American all the time. They're like, well, you weren't born there. So you're just an Americana to us, you're a gringa to us, right? And I'm not exactly fluent, but I can get by, I can handle conversation, I can carry it, right? And so there's also this recognition of lateral violence that exists in all of our communities, where you get, they try to push you down in a sense. And I mean, I felt it on both sides, and it exists, it is what it is, and that's why I talked about the radical acceptance that I just had to force myself to go through. But I recognize that in my upbringing, I got to experience things that a lot of other people did not understand. And to us, it was just everyday life. It was very normal to go take off, and my family would go stay in the woods for Brighton, and we would cook over the fire, and we would sleep outside, and we would ride around all day and play in the woods and bathe in the canal on Tucker Ridge. And that was just very normal to me growing up. And I carry those things, and I think about genuinely the connections that I have with the women specifically in my family, and how that also in turn carried over to my Chilena side too, because I look at my mother in the same exact way. There is just this, I don't know, it's a love, it's a nurturing, it is a molding that you go through as a Seminole woman that I give all of the credit to my grandmother, I give it to all of my aunts and all the women that raised me. And that's what I think about, that very connection that you were speaking to. And I think about even these little things that they do, the way they fix your skirt, or I remember the first time I was learning how to put this, this hair piece that we make, and that I presented as my talent actually for Miss Seminole and for Miss Indian World. And that took a gang of all my aunts and my cousins coming around to figure out, how did you make the piece correctly? How did you sew it correctly? And how do you put it onto your head and wrap your hair? That was a communal effort of women that did that for me. And so I think that's what's special about it. And yeah, I mean, my entire life, I've had people literally look at my face and call me a half-breed multiple times. But I don't let that melt me down or whatever it was. I just built myself back up every single time. And I can sit here and I can self-victimize myself, poor me, I'm not enough. Poor me, my Chilean mom met my Seminole dad and made me and all my siblings. But no, I'm going to take life and I'm going to build myself up, and I'm going to take space up unapologetically. And I recognize that, there's many things that I can do in turn. We can talk about cultural preservation, we can talk about environmental protections and all these things, but what does any of that actually matter without any action behind it? We can complain on Facebook, we can complain to each other, we can complain in our community meetings, but if I sit here and just keep complaining and not do anything about it, I am no better than these people that try to make others feel lesser than in our communities. And so I make it a point to sit, I talk with my grandma, and am I fluent in Lapongi? No, but I talk with her and I try every single day, and that's what matters.
One last question.
All right, well,
Mr. Chairman.
all right, a little bit over 100 years ago, there was probably about 150 to 200 Miccosukee Seminole left in the world, right? And you two on stage are here because of them. Where do you guys see yourselves and the tribes, your respective tribes, in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, hopefully I'll be in that early retirement I keep telling you about. I know you want to change my mind, but we'll see. I'm very stubborn. No, I'm hoping that in the next 5 years, we're going to see new construction within our administrative zone that would include like a new school, because we do need a new school. Education is the most important thing to me. And I do want to make a note that within the tribes, education's been seen as a lifelong endeavor. Like even if you're 70, you're still expected to learn. So to us, it was kind of a big shift to be like, oh, education for like the first 18 years of your life, that's not how it works for us. But we do need a new school. Our school is infused with culture, so that's why it's important that we have that school. A new community center, so we have a larger space to accommodate the events, our growing community, and a new library and media center. I grew up around the library whenever I was down on the res, so to me, you know, books are important. Books are a great way to establish empathy with people different from you, to experience a different world without having to travel. I know we were told growing up, you know, don't leave the Everglades, it's going to protect you, it's going to keep you safe. So if you feel a little nervous about that, you know, the library, a book, it's a great way to explore without having to make yourself feel at risk. And I also want to make sure that we do make progress on water quality within the state, because water is life and we're surrounded completely by water within the Everglades, so if that water goes, we're not going to be around much longer. So I'm hoping there's progress on that. And then finally, I also hope to see more collaboration between our tribal governments. I know within the community, it usually comes a little quicker. You know, just like, unfortunately, just like the American government, bureaucracy moves slow. You know, the wheels move slow, they do grind you down, but I do want to see us get to more collaboration and more infrastructure built within our community. And, oh, sorry, I did say last thing, but we are trying to get more of a language revitalization program going, so that way we don't lose that language, because that's where our power comes from, that communication that only we are able to understand with each other, that makes that connection deeper.
Many of mine actually mirror exactly what William just shared. And so the first two things that I have thought of are not necessarily what the tribe can do for the tribe, but what other people can do for us. And you should care about the Everglades. Genuinely, it is not just an indigenous or a native problem that, like, all these climate change issues that are happening. Statistically, like 80% of the world's biodiversity is protected by indigenous people, and we account for about 5% of the global population. That's an insane weight and responsibility to carry, considering we are like a fraction of the world, right? And so care about the Everglades, care about environmental issues that are going around. That should not just be our responsibility, because the land is going to take us too. So think about that. I also think educationally, a lot of the work that I do now is very focused in curriculum reform and like what is it to have authentic and real history in schools. And so I think about what I want for my people is for us to be, one, recognized. Like this right now, what's happening should be one, more common, but young people should be learning about Miccosukees and Seminoles if they are living here in Florida. That's just the baseline. And so I think about that in the next 5 years. And then for my own people, language, yes, it's not just a means of communication, it's a literal perception, it's a worldview. There are things like in our language, you can't even translate it properly into English. And that's insane for people to think. And our language is older than literally the United States. It's precious. And so language revitalization, fluency is something that I would love to see. I mean, we have active initiatives that are going on. We have immersion schools on some of the other Seminole reservations and whatnot. But that communal effort and like what would it be to build a programming that we could like structure it and curate it for our people. And I also think about the importance of arts, of course. You know, that's something that I think has been very healing for our people, and we should encourage and create spaces and have resources and funding and all these different things for our young people to thrive in that way. And I would really, really love to see this, I guess, how do you say this? There's a word for it, but I can't think of it right now. But this, yeah, like this taking back of like the pride that our people should carry. And it's not to say that we don't have pride. It's not that. But I think about when I was a little girl, I didn't want to tell people I was Seminole. Like, I didn't want to tell people I was Seminole because they were nasty to me when I was a kid. And I don't think that our young people should be experiencing that. And whether they're going to school on the res, whether they're going to school at, you know, some fancy private school, public school, whatever it is, yeah, I want young people to be able to stand their ground and take up space. Genuinely, that's what I want to see. I want to see representation. I want to see equity. I want to see the Everglades be protected. I want all those things.
I do movie nights for our community because movies are important to us. It keeps us all connected. So within the next 5 years, it is a personal goal of mine to get John Carpenter out there for a Q&A. So if any of you folks know John Carpenter, please send him my way. Yeah, love the guy. I mean, we got a community member who dresses up like Michael Myers every Halloween and walks around like it because I'm telling you, we love art and movies are some of the greatest. Movies might be the greatest thing this country's ever done besides going to the moon. In my opinion.
Cheyenne, you mentioned to me the other night of running for government.
Oh, yeah, I should probably mention that. I want to
Yes.
run for office in 2026.
Oh, wow.
We've never had a Seminole or Miccosukee crowd member ever on the ballot for anything in Florida, whether that's local, state, or federal. And yeah, our freaking people just deserve it. So I don't want to just be at the table or be heard. I want to like flip it and, you know, hang our art all over the walls and everything like that. That's the plan.
I do want to shout out to Mayor Omar Nickerson. He's actually the mayor of El Portal, and I believe he is part Lakota.
Yes.
So shout out to him. He is like the first indigenous
Person in Florida.
to become that level in government. So
Yeah, just like an elected official, period.
he came in to show us how it's done. So I guess we need to step it up.
Yeah.
But that's goals that within both our tribes we want because we need that representation here. You know, not to say this in a way like we're better than anybody, but we've been here before everybody else was here, so it's kind of weird to not have that representation when those people are still here.
And our people, yes, we are the first people, right, of this land, and we are literally the most underrepresented in every single aspect you can think of, whether that's, you know, in education, medically speaking, politically speaking, whatever it is. And that's where we've talked on allyship, we've talked about the importance of, you know, extending empathy and all these things, but the reality is that it cannot just be our job to pass these things or to progress forward. It's everybody's job. We should want equity for all of us, solidarity, all these things. It matters. It genuinely matters. And so yeah, think about your allyship. Think about the resources that you have available to you. If it's putting your money where your mouth is, do it. If you have connections that you can make, do it. Call your senator, call your mayor, whatever it is, and put that forth. Put your resources out and extend them to where it matters and where it's going to make a difference. That's my call to action.
I do want to qualify that with, remember, natives are people too, so we're not going to check all your boxes that you're hitting, that you're hoping we're hitting. We're not going to be perfect in your eyes, but again, it's all just towards this idea that we deserve that basic recognition of our humanity, and that's why that representation is so important.
Yep. Awesome. So Cheyenne and William, thank you for this food for thought, which has certainly nourished my soul, and may this just be the beginning. So thank you so much. Let's put our hands together for Cheyenne and William.